Hello everybody, I am Tom and you are watching me play Destiny 2. So today we're going to go over the road to the Witch Queen, which is a kind of big community post that was put out by Joe Blackburn, who is the assistant game director of Destiny 2. So, there's a lot of things to go over here. There was also a TWAB that was dropped, so I'll go over the stuff on the TWAB. Honestly, the stuff in the TWAB was nowhere near as impactful, so it's going to be less... It's going to be very quick comparatively. But, so moving forward through Destiny 2 towards the Witch Queen. First off, and I wouldn't say most importantly, but first off, the Witch Queen has been delayed to early 2022. This really wasn't unexpected for me, and honestly, I kind of welcome it. The more time they take to make good story content, the better. And also, as I said, this was probably expected from me because the actual financial hit of COVID is probably going to hit them really hard this year. So 2021 is going to be, for a lot of businesses, really bad monetarily wise. So they've pushed the Witch Queen back, and it seems like they're going to be doing that further forward instead of releasing kind of like late in the year around holiday time. They're going to be pushing it forward and actually releasing kind of earlier in the next year. Which is interesting and I think probably a good move, simply because not much stuff comes out around the time they're planning to release, which I think is like February or March, probably. It's not specified, but my guess would be February, March kind of area. And because nothing really releases there, it's a good time to release like content for a game like Destiny, where it's like a game as a service type thing, because people are looking for stuff to play and you can drop this big content release and people don't have other things to pull their attention. Anyway. That's coming. That's going to be delayed. It's coming early 2022. We didn't get a specific date, but early 2022. I would say February would be my guess. Maybe March, but my guess is probably February. Next, definitely the biggest thing. Sunsetting has been sunset. So for those unaware of what sunsetting was, if you haven't played Destiny for a while, essentially there was a bunch of weapons they essentially took out of the game. The idea being that these weapons, you don't have to worry about balance as much as if you phase out weapons. If you have a broken weapon, sooner or later it won't exist, therefore it doesn't matter. But they've gotten rid of that system because it was dumb and stupid. So essentially, any weapon that you have that has been sunset, so it couldn't be infused higher, is not going to be suddenly fine. Because they couldn't do that, because they effectively told people it's safe to get rid of these guns because they're sunset, so it would have been very annoying for the people who got rid of their good guns to then bring them back. However, anything that has not already been sunset will never sunset. So if you've got something that is currently infusible to the highest level, it will forever be infusible to the highest level. I'm also assuming that all of these guns that were sunset and are gone are likely going to be reissued. That's my assumption. Like all of the Black Armory weapons, I assume are going to come back in one form or another. Down a bit lower, we'll go over the fact that Ada 1 is actually coming back for a separate purpose, so maybe that's going to be some kind of indication that the Black Armory weapons might come back. We'll see. Next up, second biggest thing I would say for a lot of people is the power grind is gone. Instead of doing plus 50 power every season, it's plus 10 power every season, and probably a bigger jump on like the actual expansions, I would say, would probably make sense to me. Like when Witch Queen comes, I assume it's probably going to be another 50 jump. Maybe not, we'll see, but it's hard to say. But the jump now is every season you only have to go up 10 extra power, so effectively it's just the pinnacle cap is the only thing you have to grind for. Which is so much better, because the power grind is tedious and entirely pointless. You end up getting a bunch of blue items to get your power up all the way, until you hit to a point where you're like, well, okay, now I'm at power, now I can actually play the game how I want to play the game. It was stupid and dumb, and I don't know why it was still in the game, so fantastic that they're getting rid of that. That plus 10 is still fine, like it still gives an idea for people who like the power grind, they still can do that pinnacle grind, so fantastic. But the fact that I can just jump in and do the content I want to do, fantastic. Next up, we have PvP updates, which they really needed PvP updates in this, I was going to say. First off, and probably most notable for the really heavy PvP people, is the fact that 3-peaking is now gone in competitive game modes. So Trials of Osiris and Survival is no longer 3-peaking. Essentially, they've blocked emoting while you're in those modes, and additionally, you can't pull out a sword if you don't have ammo for the sword. So you can't just equip a sword and use it to 3-peek around a corner. 3-peaking, by the way, for those unaware, is short for third-person peeking. So if you go into third-person, you can look around a corner without actually being like walking out and being able to be shot. So you can essentially cheat by looking around a corner without looking around a corner. So they're eliminating that in the competitive game modes. I don't know why they're not just doing it blanketly. I guess they still want people to be able to emote in regular Crucible. And honestly, it's less of an issue in regular Crucible. If you're 3-peaking in match-made bloody Control or something, you've got problems. Anyway, they're also doing changes to stasis in the Crucible. That was actually quoted, in the Crucible. I'm hoping this means they're actually splitting up how the subclasses work in Crucible versus PvE, because they've needed to do this for a long time, and it's not hard. I don't know why they haven't done it. Just make things work differently slightly differently in PvP to PvE, because you need to balance them differently. And they seem to be doing that. Notably, the Behemoth Titan, decreased super damage reduction, so you take more damage when you're in your super, because currently the Titan, when he was in his super, literally impossible to kill. I'm just putting it out there, literally impossible to kill. They were so tanky. It also increases the energy cost for performing a light attack, so your super won't last as long. Again, Behemoth Titans could just stay in the super like a whole game. It was ridiculous. Also, when they actually cast, they no longer do that big AoE freeze. Again, fantastic move in my opinion. And reduces the traveling efficacy of Shiver Strike when slowed. What I think that means is when you've got the slow on you, you can't just do your melee ability to immediately like go at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So I think when you're slowed, you can't go as fast with your melee ability, I think is what that means. Next up, for Revenant Hunter, Withering Blade damage and tracking has been decreased. The slow stacks applied to your target have been lowered. And Shadow Dive no longer has damage reduction. So when you do Shadow Dive, you're no longer getting the massive armor, so you can... Essentially, you can snipe someone if they're trying to go through a Shadow Dive, and Shadow Dive won't protect them from the snipe. And a Shadebinder actually gets some buffs, which is good. It shows what happened with Stasis here. At the start of the game, Warlock was stupidly overpowered in Stasis, so they nerfed it way too hard. So now they need to nerf... When they nerf the other two, they're buffing Shadebinder. So fixed a bug. It says fixed bug. Essentially, they're buffing Ice Flare bolts because they weren't tracking properly, as well as the super projectiles. So essentially what was happening was they weren't tracking immediately after releasing them. They had to go like a certain distance before they would start tracking, which means it was very easy to avoid them just by jumping towards the Shadebinder, and then they just wouldn't be able to hit you. It's kind of ridiculous. Also, in general, Crystal Shatter damage is being looked at, probably decreased. And more generally for Stasis, this is potentially for both PvP and PvE. They're looking at adding damage reduction while you're actually frozen. So while you're encased in ice, you actually get damage reduction, so it's not so easy for someone to freeze you and then just pop you in the head. Freezing is... It still stops you, but I think they're looking at to make it not an instant kill. Because currently, effectively, you freeze someone, you instantly kill them. I think they're kind of changing it now, so you get frozen, you could still die, and you're open to a sniper headshot or whatever, but you have some damage reduction, so they can't just immediately one-tap you with a hand cannon. Additionally, they're looking to buff the light subclasses to match the power of Stasis. This is a fantastic move in my opinion. You don't need to nerf Stasis that hard. The nerfs that they've listed above with the Behemoth Titan and the Revenant Hunter are exactly the nerfs I would have done effectively. So they seem to, as long as they don't overhammer it, which they could do I suppose, but as long as they do what I'm expecting from what there's listed here, it's going to be fine, and then you buff some of the light subclasses to make them like catch up. Because currently, Behemoth Titan is the best Titan, Revenant Hunter is the best Hunter, and Warlock the best is Top Tree Dawnblade. So, if you can get all of them up to that level, fantastic. Fantastic. Also, they're getting more focus on anti-cheat. They've said this in the past, so we'll see. My hope is that it will be. They've doubled the size of their security team, so maybe we'll get anti-cheat. Maybe these cheaters will get gone. I will point out that cheating isn't as prevalent as people make it out to be in Destiny 2. It's prevalent. It's very prevalent, but it's not like you're seeing cheaters every single game. It's just that they get pointed out when they're there. And finally, Trials of Osiris is being focused on, specifically with its accessibility and the structure of it. Having kind of a better tiered system is what they were saying. It seems that they want to make it so that if you want to play Sweaty as Sweaty, you still can. But it's open and has like a separate tier of players for people who want to go in and just get some rewards from Trials of Osiris. I fit into that category. I'm not very good at PvP, which means, like, the most competitive thing I do is sometimes I do survival. Like, that's about as competitive as I get, and even then, I tend to just do solo queue, because I can't be bothered, like, sweating it out with a team, so... If they make trials more accessible, I'm fine with that, but I'm sure some of the sweats will not like it because it may just make their I don't know, I've heard people complain about this. I don't see the argument. Essentially, you increase the amount of people playing Trials of Osiris, it can only make that better, as far as I can tell. Next up, we have the Vault of Class that's going to be returning from Destiny 1 in next season. There will be a world's first race for it, which is interesting. I assume it will just be completed in 20 minutes by a team who knows the raid inside and out from Destiny 1. But I'll still watch it, it should be fun. They're actually trying to counteract this slightly by the fact that you not only have to beat the raid for World's First, you have to do like a list of triumphs to get the World's First title. That's going to be interesting. We'll see, I suppose. Additionally, they're talking about adding a master version of the raid, which is a good idea. I think there was this weird thing where raids, like Deepstone Crypt had a problem with it, whereas Deepstone Crypt is actually, like the combat is really easy. I don't actually mind that too much, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think if you have that, and have the raids be accessible, talking same thing with Trials of Osiris, people will go in there and do them. But you also need the ability to make them harder and give better loot. Like, I think that's a perfectly good reason to have, like, a master version of raids. The fact that that hasn't been with all of them is weird to me. So, master raids, perfect. If they push this with all raids going forward, fantastic. You have the normal raid, people can do it, everyone can kind of go in, have fun in the raid. And then you have a master version that gives better loot, more loot, and is harder. That's perfect. Ada 1 is coming back, as I mentioned before. This time she's going to be a transmog vendor though, which is interesting. So you'll be able to take your old armors that you've collected and you can essentially infuse a bit of armor to look like whatever you like. There's going to be a new currency for doing this, and that currency can be bought with silver, which I'm fine with in theory, depending on how easy it is to get the currency. If they make it prohibitively difficult to get the currency, I'll be kind of annoyed, but like, making this sellable for silver, it's the perfect thing to monetize your game like this. Like, it's literally just cosmetic shit that people, after they've played a shitload and they have perfect armor, and they just want their armor to look different, that's fine. I think that's a perfect way of monetizing the game. Additionally, and this is a huge thing that should have happened, I don't know, 5 years ago, shaders are now permanent unlocks. So all of the shaders that you have currently, you don't have to buy them back from your collections. I assume you can just pull them from collections and you have them. That's my assumption. I'm so glad this has finally happened. Next up, people were complaining because Ikora hasn't done a damn thing for ages. My assumption was because voice actor was doing stuff and she's been busy. So apparently she's coming back. So I don't know whether or not they've revoiced her or whether or not they've just paid her enough money to come back. I don't know, we'll see. But she's going to be playing a bigger role moving forward towards the Witch Queen, and even next season they said specifically that in Season 14 she's going to be playing a much bigger role. Also, they're going to be adding stasis weapons, so they're going to be adding energy weapons and power weapons that are stasis based. I'm interested to see how this works, because currently, like, if you have a solar based weapon, the only thing it really does is get rid of solar based shields more effectively. So I don't know whether they're going to add stasis shields, or whether or not stasis weapons are going to not break shields particularly effectively, but they can freeze maybe, or slow. I don't know, we'll see. I'll be interested to see how they implement it, because currently there's only one stasis weapon in the game, and it's very niche, like it creates massive ice crystals. So it's interesting. We'll see how it works, I suppose. Also, lastly, we have gilded titles. So if you've completed a title, you can now do additional titles on top of an additional title on top of that to gild it and turn it into a different color. They've realized that just doing that every season is kind of dumb, so what they've changed it now to is that every time you gild a title, it will add to a count of how many times you gild it. So if you gild, I don't know, Dredgen, if you gild Dredgen title 17 times, because you're a masochist, then you'll have next to your name, it'll say Dredgen, and then it'll be gold, and it'll have like a little 17 next to it saying how many times you've actually gilded it. Which is a great idea, it's just a way to flex, and I think it's a perfectly good change. But that was pretty much everything summarized from the moving forward in Destiny towards the Witch Queen expansion. So finally we have the TWAB. There's a few more things in the TWAB that I'm going to go over. I only have really 2 things that I find particularly interesting from the TWAB. Firstly, the drop rate for ritual weapons. So these are the weapons that you get from playing the playlists. The kind of unique weapons that you get from playing the playlists. They've talked about increasing the drop rate for that, because they do want it to be a dedicated grind, but because of how many perks these guns have, like they have a huge perk pool, So getting the perfect one is already a grind. So they're talking about increasing the drop rate of that. I may actually go into Gambit to get a bottom dollar now if they increase the drop rate, because I couldn't be bothered farming it. But if they increase the drop rate, I might go in and actually farm a God Roll for one. And finally, for console players, they're rolling out their DDoS protection over the next month or so. This is a move that should have been done ages ago, but they're finally getting around to it, which is great. So there was a big problem with people on console getting their IP found and then being DDoSed. That's now supposedly going to be fixed because they're using a Steam integrated thing that actually stops DDoSing, which is interesting. I assume it's just a protection barrier between IP and server, so people can't find your IP directly off the server. I haven't actually looked into it, but that's my assumption. So that's really good, but that's it for this video. I don't know how long this is going to end up being, probably like 15, 20 minutes or something. So there was a lot of stuff to go over here. Most notably, sunsetting has been sunset, which is fantastic. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.